I think I'll just introduce it since we're going to carry on from the second preface and the reading that we've done before.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
so, yeah, last week we got into the second preface and the critique of pure reason. I tried to illustrate that even though there are different ways to read the second preface, that we will be reading it as sort of continuous with the first preface because much of what Kant says can be summed up in the first few lines that he introduces the second preface in. Um, and last week's discussion focused on the nature of science, what science is, and how we ought to think about science. And that, for Kant, inevitably leads us to think about what is, I would maybe say, analogous to science, but is not yet science proper, which is the study of logic. Um, and as we discussed, logic is not something psychological or empirical. It is the rules of thinking, um, or pure thought, whatever that might mean, regardless of what kind of thing the thinking in question is about. So, logic is the sort of thinking that is used to think about any kind of being, um, in general, as such. And the reason that Kant gave us why it wasn't a true science or a science proper, but what he calls the outer courtyard of science, was that logic doesn't deal with objects. And we said that the term object is going to become important, and we'll try and figure out what on earth an object is. Because if you thought you knew, uh, after reading Kant, you will feel like you haven't or didn't know what an object is ever in your life. So it'll be good fun to try and figure that out. But what I wanted to say about that is last week, I think Daniel brought up Hegel in connection with Kant, and he said that the section of logic made him think about something like the science of logic, which is Hegel's major work. And one of the ways to think about that, in contrast with Kant and in contrast with the project that we're doing now, because Hegel's relationship to Kant is complex, is to think about why Hegel titles his work The Science of Logic when Kant says that logic is not a science proper. Um, so that might be one way to distinguish these two thinkers. And one of the ways that, I mean, I don't know the text off by heart and I don't know the text that well, but one of the things that might be at issue is whether logic does have actual objects that it deals with. There are things called thought objects, and those thought objects have a reality, and thought objects are like primary objects, or it does not have real objects, and the real objects, or the objective objects, however you want to phrase them, are not purely thought objects. They might be somehow non empirical, not from experience, but not completely intellectual either. And that might be the sort of position that Kant is taking. That science proper deals with these objects that are not from experience, but are not purely logical either. And so this week we're going to read a little bit further and see what the sciences that Kant has in mind are, what sciences proper are, and how we're going to find a new pathway for metaphysics by modeling them off of the sciences. Um, and so we shall see maybe a few instances of the kind of objects that are properly scientific, and where they exist, what kind of entities they are, if we can raise those questions. So yeah, I think that'll be the best way to get into it. Um,
Yeah, that sounds good. I appreciate that intro for sure.
cool. So last week we began to talk about the two sciences that Kant has modeled cognition off of, and we said that they are mathematics and physics. Um, and these are the two theoretical cognitions of reason that are supposed to determine their objects a priori, independently of experience. The former, mathematics, entirely purely, the latter, physics, at least in part purely, but also following the standard sources of cognition other than reason. So, just to brush over it, mathematics and physics are two paradigm cases of sciences proper. They deal with objects, and they do so, or the objects they deal with are independent of experience. Mathematical objects are completely independent of experience in this pure way, because pure for Kant also means like entirely removed from, um, or not containing any content from experience. And physics is partly pure, so it has some relationship to the empirical world. Um, how to cash that out is going to be difficult, and we'll try and think about that. But what it will require us to do, at least in part, is if we have an empirical conception of science, to pause and think about what is physics, and can we have a pure physics? What might a pure physics look like? Can we come up with a philosophy of nature rather than a philosophy of science? Is the sort of question I'm asking. So, contemporary philosophy of science deals with empirical scientific theories and the justification behind those theories, whether they're consistent, whether they are evolving, whether they are good theories, what are the conditions for good theories. It doesn't try to assert something about the reality of nature in and of itself, what nature is, and how we ought to think about the physical world and the laws of nature, whatever those are. Um, but philosophy of nature does that. It says nature is made up of certain things, and these certain things behave in certain ways or follow certain rules or something like that. So one of the things at issue is if there is an a priori science of physics, physics is not, even when we run an experiment, uh, the experience is not what's important in our running of the experiment. There's something else going on with how we need to think about what science is doing. And I think it'll be useful to have like our ordinary picture of science in mind. What do you think of when you think about science, Dan, or physics?
Lab coat, uh, uh, black holes, stars, people in a big TED room, TED talk room, a person delivering the facts of the universe, mind blowing, string theory, pontifications, speculations, um, space. Space is probably the best, and I'm thinking of the Hadron Collider. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
so I mean, all of those things are relevant. Maybe like how do they test their theories, right? Like, what do they do? So, like, as philosophers, we sit here, we analyze texts, right? We read arguments, and we lay out the premises and the conclusions, and we go, yeah, it's a good argument, or no, it's pretty bad. Uh, and we do well. I am engaged in the process of armchair philosophy for a lot of my life, although I know that there's other people that do philosophy in different manners. Um, but our physicists just sitting in their chair going, yeah, those premises of Newton's pretty good, but
they they are at the moment endlessly shooting uh proton or what shooting things at each other, hydrons in the Hadron Collider, and then watching they're running
yeah,
experiments. They form hypotheses and then they make predictions and then they test and then they analyze the data. Um,
good, precisely. They run experiments, and we might want to think about what on earth justifies experiments, and the answer we give will radically change our world, I imagine. Before I continue on to this, because what happens if we suppose that when we do an experiment, the source of our learning is experience?
yeah,
What happens to the type of evidence available?
the type of evidence it gives is from experience in
Uh-huh.
the experiment. Mm.
Yeah, and so what does that mean?
Well, you're ignoring all evidence that is not from experience.
That's one way
Even
of putting it. But what about what do we know about experience? Right? It happens and there's stuff, but do we or is everything always the same that we experience? Or does new stuff happen every day? Is it possible that, what
new
happened?
stuff, new stuff happens. Our perception or our sensation is it seems to be like there are a certain amount of sense organs, but then we can modify our perception. We can also seem to develop our perception. So then that also changes what we can observe in experiments. And there seems to be endlessly going back and forth like that, maybe. Like what we can observe, how we observe it.
Yeah, I mean the basic crux here is that stuff in experience changes. Like experience has an endless wealth of content. Every day is beautiful because there's new stuff. It's wonderful. But
Okay,
in terms of
this
certain, that means that we run the experiment and we see it happen and we go, cool. I don't know. I've got a hair clip in front of me. I drop the hair clip or something like that, and I go, cool. The hair clip falls. Gravity applies, and then I wonder, does it apply now or later? Do I drop the hair clip to do the same experiment the next day and the next day and the next day? Or do we think that's ridiculous? Like, I understand that like scientists have to do a certain amount of testing and they have to collect data and like look at the charts. I've been reading some scientific papers of recent. There's lots of cool diagrams they have and graphs. Um, but if we want to think about, well, it depends on how we think about science again. But if we really think about it, if the certainty that we get from experience or the type of knowledge that we get from experience is Kant's word contingent and particular, then everything that we get from it is only going to be like, I mean, maybe you could use the word relatively certain. Like we could say that 99 out of 100 times it's true that this clip will fall or something like that. But that doesn't sound like gravity because gravity says that like everything falls at 9.11 meters per second to the -2 or something like that. I don't know the laws of the heart. But if it was from experience, it wouldn't happen every time, would it? Maybe one morning you wake up and things are just floating. Who knows? How does gravity work?
yeah, this the you we pushing into this question of how do we justify experiments, and now we doubting the consistency of experience or of sensible things, and the predictive power of the experiments that we can run, and that there's um
Yeah, the predictive power is an interesting word. I wonder if predictive power isn't like an adjustment of what is an outcome of the sort of reversal in thinking that's going on. So we can think about experiments and we run them. We can think that the proof is the experiment. Or we can think that the experiment is a confirmation of the hypothesis, and that's the proof.
yes,
Uh,
okay,
but that reverses things, right? Then the experience is not the justification. It simply confirms our hypothesis. But
yeah, yeah,
this theory is itself the justification. We're just watching that play out in the experiment. Um,
yeah,
I think Kant has something closer to that than he does to we learn from the experiment, which we'll see in a second once we get into math
yes,
physics. Um, but where he differs is that it's not the predictive power,
yeah,
it's the scientific ability to understand what's going on. Not that
yes,
A predicts B or gravity predicts the thing will fall. It's that gravity explains things falling.
yeah, yeah,
It doesn't say that things will fall, and this is a useful hypothesis that extends to a certain scope of things, which is
yeah,
again is. does gravity apply the same everywhere or something like that? Or how does the laws of gravity work? I don't know. We need like a physicist to get into all of these intricate details and to figure this out. But the crux here is we think things fall. And we
Yeah,
don't really necessarily want to predict that things will continue to fall. We just want to say things fall because of gravity. It's not that things will continue to fall insofar as gravity is operational. That's a
yeah,
different framing. Um, and
yeah,
so,
yeah. That's a really cool uh distinction. I tend to have I have a some sense of a like the image of the scientist in that has this kind of like an honor with it is the one who is learning from what they observe rather than confirming what they hypothesize to be via because that gets via the experiment that you run to validate
yeah,
the hypothesis. Um, I guess like I'm associating the first one with this like with the early vision of science. Um,
mhm,
like these natural uh, uh going out into the world and observing natural sciences. I don't know if that's the correct way, but like going out and finding out, letting yourself be um uh changed by what you observe.
yeah. Cool. So there's a lot to get into here. I think maybe the last part about the sciences is to think about. So we've talked about where the justification comes from. We've also talked about predictive power versus understanding. And I guess the last question to keep in mind, all of these may or may not be answered throughout the course of the series, but they're questions that I think come up with Kant's work is, where is a law?
Yeah,
Where do the
yeah,
laws exist? Like we see gravity, right? And gravity
yeah,
is a force of attraction. And the force of attraction is a force of attraction between, I don't know, the thing that is falling and the earth or whatever, like the core, the radius that is drawing this thing towards it. Um,
yeah,
I, yes, it doesn't really matter for the explanation. But what's important is we can ask the question, where does that relationship exist? Is it a relationship between things in experience, the pencil and the earth? Um, is it like a self relation between an object and itself, or is it a relation between the mind and the world? How do we track that sort of stuff? Uh,
yeah, yeah,
are the laws in the world, or are they in the mind? Might be another way of putting the question. Because if they were in the world, then it seems like they wouldn't be laws, properly speaking, depending on what we mean by that, because laws are supposed to apply all the time, universally and necessarily. And we know that experience is contingent on particular. So it doesn't seem like we could get knowledge of laws from experience because experience is always changing. There's new stuff happening every day. So one might
is
wonder,
there I
yeah,
I'm with you and I'm wanting to keep the momentum with you, but this um the contingency of experience, like how do we establish its particularity or
well, everything that happens in experience is unique. This moment is this moment. It'll never happen again. We could repeat the words. I could say, this moment is this moment. It'll never happen again. We could repeat the words, but it's different, right? Now
yeah,
you said the first one, and the second one
mi-
is not the same as the first one. It's unique. And uh, unfortunately, things in experience change. It's just, I'm not really sure how we establish it. It's just one of the odd features about experience is that
one of the laws of experience.
I'm not even sure how we get to know it, but like
Yeah.
we can reflect on experience and go, well, a lot of different stuff has happened in my life, and
Yes.
you know, every day seems to bring something new. And even though things like there are some things that happen with consistency, like the sun rises every morning, to give Hume's famous example.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe it doesn't. maybe it's just insofar as I've seen it rise every morning. Um, Sometimes it's cloudy, I guess, if you want to put it that way. But you know, it's really difficult to tell what's going to happen. And the older I get, the worse that seems to be. Um,
Yeah.
like,
What the the I'm with you. I'm with you. And also like the whole uh, perspectival position, like the sun rising or we going around the sun. Then there's this other thread here that's on this theme of gravity, which like um I guess I'm appreciating more and more how radical it is to apply um the objects of one's study to one's interiority. So
mhm,
it's like I experience gravity by the ball that I throw and that it drops, or I think that's what's happening. It's falling. Um, but then there is also this interoceptive sense of centers, and then is there the sense of falling towards a center, and what does that tell me about this universal force, or um, where's but okay, that's just a thread.
mhm.
Um, but the part of what we've covered, I'm still, what justifies the experiment? What justifies us experimenting? I mean, is that what we're still kind of questioning into, or
Yeah, that's part of the question. And I think it'll remain
okay,
an open question until later on in the text. But I think I just want to quickly like continue with this uniqueness and particularity of
yeah,
these, just to clarify. So like another thing about experience is that we're always in contact with individuals. So like I have this water bottle here that you can't see on the thread, but we are individuals having an individual discussion with one another. Um, and you can think about the stuff that we use for experiments, right? So if we're going to drop a ball for this gravity test, we're going to use a specific ball. It's going to be this ball. And this ball is not necessarily the same as every other ball. Maybe it weighs slightly differently than other balls. And even if like the gram difference is not that much, perhaps the atomic difference is more. Uh, how fine grained do we want to go to call something the same? And then again, the ball is never numerically identical to any other ball because it can't occupy the same space and time as another ball, right? So, like, we got two identical balls, maybe, or
yeah,
something like that.
yeah,
But we can't put them into the same place at the same time. We can drop one and it'll hit the floor at a certain time, but we can't drop both
yeah,
of them to one. Unless we've got some really good press stick or something like that lying around.
yeah, yeah.
Did you get the point?
This I do, and I love this. I love this space of thinking. I guess one way to say it, like I took a look at the Parmenides recently, and it reminded me of or I guess the key signifier that I come to in this area now is like an instance. So when you're like now
Yeah.
and then now, or even if you use like number like one and one, they are the same, almost completely so, except for being something like a different instance, or like
Mhm.
the the difference is so minimal it maybe is just difference, or uh, like now and now, two two instances, and then that word, the word that I'm really relying on a lot and thinking this is an instance, or like
Yeah. And an
yeah,
instance is great because an instance is always an instance of a kind. It's one thing, but it's one thing of a certain larger category of which it falls in. So it seems to already contain that similarity and difference within itself. Um, but yeah, so the point for physical science is that if we take from the experiment and what we are always experimenting on is individuals in a particular context in a particular time, then how do we apply these universally? Like, is it just like, okay, so here's one account, maybe, and I'm gonna butcher Locke because I haven't read too much Locke. But Locke thinks that we form general ideas by adding together our experiences. So we have this experience of like simple substances, and then we aggregate them and put them together. So I experience this round table and that round table and that round table, and they're all different round tables. But when we add them up together, they form some general conception. That general conception is the aggregate, it's the addition of one instance to another instance. And so we can apply to this more general spectrum that we're thinking about. So that might be one way of thinking about it. But then if we do that, then I imagine, um, firstly, that's like what I've been calling like the Google Facts version of knowledge. Like the more facts we can accumulate, the better our knowledge would be. Knowledge is an aggregate, and it consists in just learning more and more stuff. Um, the best and the most knowledgeable person in that sort of a view would be the trivia king, I would imagine. Um, and that's
GPT.
all. Yeah, I think that that's all that knowledge is on a view like that, which is important to think about whether that is what knowledge is. Knowledge is whether knowledge is an accumulation of facts or whether knowledge is something different. Um, but on that sort of a view, science or empirical science seems to work fine for some people, but it has this issue of just being probabilistic, right? Like, and that's not a bad thing. Maybe science is probabilistic. That's a whole account. Um, but then, what to do with these laws? Like, gravity is not meant to be probabilistic. It's meant to be universal and necessary. It's supposed to apply all the time to everything. Um, and again, I don't know what the story is with gravity and how like later developments in science, like relativity theory, would reflect on this. But if gravity is going to be a law and laws are universal and necessary, we better hope it's not from experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
We better hope that our test is confirming something rather than proving something.
Okay. We're not deriving our laws from experience. We are coming to experience with our laws.
Something like that. Or,
Even
or,
even
or
our
more
our
radically,
say again?
or more radically, we're deriving experience from our laws.
Yes, okay. And then the question that I mean, it's not I understand it's a big question. We won't resolve it, but this idea of like where the idea of law comes from, that it must be universal or um,
Mhm.
always the case or
Yeah, where the idea comes from, what a law is a good question. Um, I'm sure there's many debates on it, but we'll hear one side of that debate, at least. So yeah, let's talk a bit more about mathematics so that we can think about what kind of entities the real sciences deal with. And we had this conversation briefly last week, but it's worth rehashing again. So yeah, it's going to skip forward here. Mathematics has, from the earliest times to which the history of human reason reaches, in that admirable people of the Greeks, traveled the secure path of a science. Yet it must not be thought that it was as easy for it as for logic, in which reason has only to do only with itself. To find that royal path, or rather itself to open it up, rather, I believe that mathematics was left groping about for a long time, chiefly among the Egyptians, and that its transformation is to be ascribed to a revolution brought about by the happy inspiration of a single man in an attempt from which the road to be taken onward could no longer be missed, and the secure course of a science was entered on and prescribed for all time and to an infinite extent. The history of this revolution in the way of thinking, which was far more important than the discovery of the way around the famous Cape and of the lucky one who brought it about, has not been preserved for us. But the legend handed down to us by Diogenes Laertius, who names the reputed inventor of the smallest elements of geometrical demonstrations, even of those that, according to common judgment, stand in no need of proof, proves that the memory of the alteration wrought by the discovery of this new path in its earliest footsteps must have seemed exceedingly important to mathematicians and was thereby rendered unforgettable. A new light broke upon the first person who demonstrated the isosceles triangle, whether he was called Thales or had some other name. For he found that what he had to do was not to trace what he saw in this figure, or even trace its mere concept and read off, as it were, from the properties of the figure, but rather that he had to produce the latter, the properties of the figure, from what he himself thought into the object and presented through construction according to a priori concepts, and that in order to know something securely a priori, he had to ascribe to the thing nothing except what followed necessarily from what he himself had put into it in accordance with its concept.
Fire. Just we get a shout out there. Cape of Good Hope. Nice. That's dope.
Always good, but not as
The
important
most,
as the
yeah,
discovery.
yeah. The worst thing I could say about that piece of text. But this last piece, probably from um for he found, I think I'm like 7 lines up. For he found that what he had to do was not to trace what he saw in this figure, that's the isosceles, or even trace its mere concept and read off, as it were, from the properties of the figure, but rather that he had to produce the latter, the properties of the figure, from what he himself thought into the object and presented through construction according to a priori concepts. So like he had to produce the latter from what he himself thought into. Thinking is this productive, active, creative motion, what he thought into, but then, and uh, that produces the properties of the object, even the isosceles, it seems. But that's happening according to these a priori concepts.
Yeah, I wonder about thinking being characterized as this productive activity. I mean, um, I think it's almost correct to characterize it that way. Thinking is productive, but thought itself might not be. Uh, Concepts for Kant are, I think they're static. Again, I think this is a point where Hegel and Kant differ because Hegel has dynamic concepts. They're dialectical, they develop out of themselves. For Kant, we have to produce um, the the triangle through construction, and the construction I imagine is mathematical construction. And so, mathematical construction is neither purely thought, because that would be logic, nor simply empirical. So it's again this weird non-empirical thing that is related to thought. And I kind of made a suggestion, and when I say I made a suggestion, I want to say I kind of gave it away last week. But if we try to think about construction and how it works, one of the ways to think about it is we get a piece of paper, right? We pick up our pen and we draw the triangle. But then I raised the problem last week. When we try to measure the interior angles of the paper drawing triangle, they're never going to equal 180 degrees perfectly, or they're not going to follow the proofs perfectly and stuff like that. They might have like the rough features, but if we really get into the nitty gritty of it, it's not going to be quite right. Um, I mean, we could do a diagram, but I really think that people could imagine a triangle themselves. And that's precisely the point. The triangle on the piece of paper isn't the triangle that you're thinking about when you're doing mathematics. The triangle in your imagination might be. So the productive part of this whole thing might not be thinking, but it might actually be imagination. Uh, Imagination might be that constructive power that enables us to produce figures and stuff like that in the mind's eye, so to speak. And this passage really relates to me quite a lot because like this passage hits home in a way that's very true and meaningful for me because I remember I was sick for a week in like grade 10 when we were doing Euclidean geometry, and we were doing proofs in Euclidean geometry. And for my whole matric life, for my whole school life, I just didn't understand maths. Like it didn't make any sense to me because we had these figures, we had these shapes, and they had these proofs about like the interior angles and stuff like that, and we had like a compass and like a straight edge, and like I could never get the interior angles to match up. Like I would try and measure the triangles on the page and stuff like that, like to cheat at the proof, and it never worked out. And the teachers would always be like, "You're doing it wrong," but they wouldn't tell me what on earth I was doing wrong. Like I was like, "These are the shapes. This is what I'm copying. Surely this is right, right?" Like explain me like I'm five what I'm doing wrong here, because like surely if the angles on this page that I'm measuring of the diagram don't measure up to what's supposed to be proved, then the proof is wrong, right? The evidence speaks
You're
in,
putting your protractor over the
yeah,
yeah.
the evidence speaks against the proof. Surely, I measured it. Look at the ruler with me, and then they're like, "Why? What are you doing? This is a proof."
Yeah.
There's not even a numerical value when you do like Pythagorean theorem. Why are you using a ruler? What's going on with you? But then when you really think about it, like what's going on when you do maths? Like last week I said in a sort of rhetorical flourish, I've never seen a triangle. And it really does feel that way. Like I've seen them printed on pages, I've drawn plenty, but are they perfect triangles? No, probably not. I don't know if I've ever seen a perfect triangle. I've seen triangular things, maybe. Um, but pause and think about that for a second, right? If this passage is true, if he found that what we had to do was not trace off what we saw in the figure, or even trace it to be a concept and read off, as it were, from the properties of the figure, but rather produce the latter from what we ourselves think into the object, that seems perfectly reasonable, right? Like I do the proof in grade 9 for like Pythagorean theorem, and I look at the triangle on the page, and I find out that I don't know a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared or something like that, and I go, hmm, this is a white triangle in South Africa. Does it apply to black triangles overseas or red ones in other exam papers? And it's only this big. But if the picture was bigger, does it still apply? If it was like I don't know, like a 20 centimeter picture, is it the same as a 10 centimeter picture of a triangle? Like, what's going on? I know that sometimes like bigger animals behave differently than smaller animals, and that like if I have like a higher concentration of like liquid when I do a chemical experiment, that the experiment will work out differently. Like if I mix like a 90% bleach solution, I'm going to probably like burn through a bottle. But if I mix like a 10% bleach solution, it's going to be different. So like why the difference for triangles? Like why don't I have to study each individual one? Why don't I have to catalog the book and take photographs of them or do the drawings of them like the old nature scientists used to do and go dissect them, like take them apart into their lines, cut them at the tip and see what they're made out of, so to speak. Like it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
Like it's definitely a different study than biology, where we literally have to dissect the corpse and study the like organs and stuff like that, and there's going to be different mutations depending on different species.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's definitely different from like physics. Like I don't run the experiment a couple times for some. Well,
Yeah.
maybe this is just laziness of learning, but the way I remember doing it, and I got it wrong, so don't learn from my example here, is you listen to the teacher and the teacher says it's true, so you just apply it as if though it is, right?
Yeah. The This is such fantastic Hadley law. But, genuine, like but so like just noticing a few things about it, it's like it's there's a certain perplexity that you had in terms of the commitment to the error mode.
Mhm.
Everything else is functioning from experience, like from the sensible thing, from the thing that I see. I have this thing called maths. I have this math class. Surely math must function in that same way. And then you meet
Yeah,
triangles. And then you, because of your commitment to the error mode,
yeah,
like the difference really strikes you. And
yeah,
the like the teacher, as just often the case, they're not uh the educational emphasis is not really on understanding. It's like on repetition and remembering. So they're not going to go through the negative labor with you of contemplating triangles and why on earth they function like nothing else in nature or in your experience or in your school subjects, or like why is it the case?
mhm,
Um, and then relating like my own, because I named this interoception or this interiority. Um, it's and you've said you've never seen a triangle. You've never come across a triangle. Which which if I stop and think about it, it's true. So, but what I relate more to with that is this is the interoceptive sense of anatomical structure if it would render mathematically, which I have some a priori concept that it does, but my sensation has not, my sense has not configured. So there's always like at least a little thing that uh, is missing or a bit skew, a bit
yeah, slightly off.
slightly off. Yeah.
Let's think about this for a second before we move on to science. I have an analogous science story, by the way, that I'll also tell once we get there. But we'll expand out while we're here. Okay, so we have to produce the triangles somehow by ourselves in imagination, I guess. Construction in pure imagination is sometimes what it's called. Very cool terms. Um, but then think about it. Last week, I think I said that Newton's proof for gravity was F equals G m1 times m2 over r squared. We're not going to put the formula on the screen yet. And then I said something about what the r squared was. Do you remember what r squared is?
A radius squared
Yeah, and what's a radius?
from the center to the circumference, the line,
Yeah, and the circumference of what?
circle.
Yeah, which is
A circle's a circle, a line,
what? Well, no, I mean you're right. What's the general class for those things that we call circles and the other stuff that goes along with them?
shapes.
Yeah, good. And shapes are mathematical objects, aren't they?
Yeah.
So is the proof for gravity or is the law of gravity a physical being or is it a construction in imagination?
Is the proof of gravity a physical being? With the mathematical analog that we have, it's like, is the proof of a circle a tennis ball?
Mhm.
Does that analogy
I think it is
map?
for the sake
Is
of
the So you're asking what's the analogous mathematical object for the law of gravity
I'm
that proves
asking
it?
I'm asking sort of so like so there's a circle and we talk about the tennis ball being circular, but the tennis ball isn't a perfect circle, right? I don't know.
Mm.
Kind of rough around the edges, especially when your dog chews on it. Uh, it's just not perfectly circular. Um, and so even though we can have a radius and we can have like an arc and all of these things, we're not going to be able to prove, I don't know, that the interior angles of a triangle are equal to 90 degrees or something like that weird circle proof that relies on using the radius and the chord. I can't remember it. It's in Aristotle's metaphysics. Um, we're not going to do that with a tennis ball. We could draw the arcs and the lines and the circumference, but again, not going to work out perfectly. So we have these mathematical shapes or these things that look shape like, the slightly skewed, the slightly offish. And I guess my wonder is, are we taking our shapes from them? Do we derive circle from the tennis ball? Or do we shape our sensory experience by these constructions in imagination, so to speak? And to just consider that for a second, we draw the triangle in our mind's eye or something like that. And we can imagine a perfect triangle. Uh, you can do it, just try. Um, and we've got laws and we've got mathematical formulas that correspond to these shapes and the basic atomic units of shapes and lines and the basic proofs that we have from Euclidean geometry. Um, and understanding things like the radius of a circle and how that relates to the proof of gravity um, means that we have a proof that can be confirmed through experience. I can drop the thing and watch it fall at a certain speed and confirm that it will do that. But the proof of experience is not itself derived from something in experience. It's a construction in imagination. And we may want to think about whether this is an issue. Uh, and this is something wonderful that Kant opens up, but I'm not sure that it's on the table for everybody. We might want to think about what imagination is and what on earth it's doing. Does imagination, when you imagine something, does it reproduce something or is it productive in some way? So, do I take my circularity from the tennis ball? Um, or do I take my triangularity from, I don't know, the Eiffel Tower? Um, or is it the other way around? Like, what are we doing when we imagine? Um, I know there's concrete cases where imagination is clearly reproductive. Like, I was at a barbecue on Friday, and I can imagine being there. Right, the smell of meat is in the air. There's people that I know around. It's bright and shiny day in Georgia. That's clearly empirical, and that's clearly reproductive. I'm calling back to mind something that occurred in experience, right? But the triangle, kind of fuzzy. I don't know. Or the circle, kind of fuzzy. I don't know. Am I calling back the circularity of the tennis ball? Because if I am, and it's not a perfect circle, is my imagination just bad? Is imagination false? Does
Hmm.
it only produce falsehoods? What what does imagination do? Like, so here's an issue. Mathematical things, if they are imaginary, aren't real or they don't apply to objects or something like that, we might entertain that position for a little while. And one of the reasons why we might entertain that position is one of the things that imagination is often associated with is error. And the reason why it's associated with error is because you could misimagine things, first of all. I could think that it was a perfectly nice day on Friday, but it could have been terrible. Um, and we can imagine all sorts of things that don't seem to exist: unicorns, fairies, mermaids, all the cool stuff in life. It's really, really sad. Uh, but we think of stuff that doesn't exist all the time. We have daydreams and imagine stuff. Well, I don't know if you do, but I definitely do sometimes. I was just watching an anime recently, and I was like, wow, this is really a creative expression of something. And half of these creatures don't really exist, or I hope they don't, because they're scary. Um, and so it seems like imagination doesn't deal with truth in any meaningful sense of the word. Like, what we need to do is stop imagining and just think, right? Surely that's the way to go about it. But if what's going on here is correct, and if mathematical objects are produced by construction and pure imagination, instead of just being purely conceptual, um, which is another position that one can take about mathematics, is that they're not derived from experience, but that they're purely conceptual, uh, then we've got something else going on here. Uh, we'll talk about the purely conceptual view of mathematics a bit later, I guess, when we get into the analytic synthetic distinction. And then we might have a bit to say about Russell, although I don't know that much about Russell. Um, we'll we'll spend some time talking about 2 + 2 = 4.
It's needed. It's needed.
Yeah.
The, was there anybody grunting at the barbecue?
Not that I recall, but there were two people that sat almost in perfect silence the entire time.
Ah,
It was
okay.
bizarre.
Were they sitting together in silence?
Kind of, but by in silence, I mean they were only speaking to each other. They were just closed door, and that's
Ah,
okay.
okay.
I think like people had
Yes.
tried to strike up conversation with them, but it hadn't worked. And I don't know. Maybe I've just been forced into socializing my entire life. Uh,
Oh, okay.
Part of the forced socialization is definitely that like it should kind of work.
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. It was a room full of academics, and they were academics. Surely they had something to say.
There's a um I think imagination is an incredible would have to say concept to try and get real technical on. Um, I'm just tracking as we speak the different senses of it that have occurred to me. So I've been presencing this uh, interoceptive, I guess more tactile.
Mhm,
So like if I imagine a shape, it tends to, or a triangle, it tends to be with my self sense. It's less like an imagistic mind image.
mhm,
Um, I was hearing more of the image in your imaginative effort. Then there's like the uh, like a chimera kind of thing, like smushing things from experience together and calling that imagination, like the figures in a an anime or a show.
mhm.
And then the kind of imaginations that is at play in like a dream or daydream that does also have this uh imagistic play.
Mhm.
Somewhere you might say like a mind's eye or um
Yeah, I wonder about this imagistic, like, because I don't imagine that the triangle comes fully stamped, so to speak. Like, it's not like just like a JPEG or like a sticker that I'm thinking of. Like, I'm thinking of like you draw the triangle in your lines. I guess I draw a lot. My brother's an artist. I like to draw. I've drawn since I
yeah,
was. So when I'm imagining things, I imagine the process of drawing. Like I imagine like
yes,
what do I need to do to make the line look like this, right? And
yeah,
I'll try, like how to move my arm or something like that. So there may be this like interoceptive aspect to it, to imagination, and imagination may have some relation to the body. It's unclear whether Kant's going to clarify that for us, but it's a good question. Um,
yeah,
like, what are we doing? And even the usage of the word, like the mind's eye, to
yes,
construct this image, like I'm like tracing the figure. Like that's why I think Kant always uses like these active words, like tracing, instead of
tracing,
like,
yeah,
picturing. Like having it pictured is like you reproduce it, but like tracing is like we're like following each line segment until we produce it. So it's like this
yeah,
mental. It seems to be like a mental activity rather than a mental product, so to speak.
yes, yes. I think that's what I was when I reread this bit that's highlighted. That's what I put in my own words, but that's the sense that I was trying to. Uh,
Yeah, because like even here he said that like he has to produce the latter from what he himself thought into the object and presented through construction.
yeah,
Even that, the triangle isn't already made. It's produced through this effort of uh, thinking according to concepts or something like that.
yeah. According to, yeah, and then that's the piece where it's like according to a priori concepts. So like, where are those now? Or like, what are those?
Yeah,
Yeah,
we one of the questions will itself be like, I guess, as we get more and more into the weeds with this, the questions will be things like, well, what is the relationship between imagination and thinking, or concepts and images, or
yes,
experience and images, and
yeah,
experience and sensation, right? Like we have all these, in Kant's words, cognitive faculties, so to speak. And the difficulty of cognitive faculties, and this is a difficulty that Hegel brings up because he hates cognitive faculty speak, is that we distinguish them, the imagination is distinct from thinking, right? That they're two different activities because one has concepts and one has propositions, and the other has like images or something like that. If you want to think about the imagination as the faculty of images, but then like the mind, right? Does the mind contain thinking and imagination, or is like can we separate? Are there beings with just imagination without thought, that also have sensation? Are there
Mm.
beings with only thought? Uh, do these things come apart in any way, or are like they separate functions of the same one thing? Uh,
Mm.
it's hard to say what's going on there with like
Yeah.
faculty speak, um, because faculties are always faculties of something.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And even like that, like there's this soft implication when you say the mind's like that it implies like a space, that the mind is the space-like thing in which there are faculties, as opposed to itself being an activity or being
Mhm.
itself a faculty, like not a space of faculties. Or it's thoroughly it's thoroughly enjoyable to be in the weeds, but
Yeah. Well, you might want to think about other things with faculties. I mean, I'm not sure the analogy holds, but like universities have faculties, right? They're embodied by different buildings. You go to the philosophy department or the philosophy
yeah,
faculty, science faculty, and stuff like that. But the university is not the sum of its faculties, right? It's not just some building. It's like it is the working of the activities of the different faculties, and that is the university. But the faculties are still faculties of a university, right? They have this unity and diversity, so to speak, to them,
mm,
where it's not a university if there's only a maths department.
yeah, yeah,
So too, I imagine it wouldn't be a mind if there's just thought.
yeah,
Maybe
maybe.
pretty pretty uninteresting mind, I would imagine.
Yeah.
But yeah, are there different types of minds? Perhaps that's a question. Like, uh, if there were such a thing as God, which some people believe in, what type of mind would God have? Does God have
Yes.
to think about things, or does God just produce things by thinking about them? In the beginning was the Word, so they say, and did God speak things into existence, or did he have to go, I wonder what a cat looks like? Uh,
Just to just to plug for any potential future listener who is a believer and wants a testimony. I said a prayer the one morning, and I was like puzzling over this issue of the way that this presence of what I was naming God would fluctuate in my self sense of relatedness and connection. And I was like, why is this the case? Like, why does it seem to oscillate like this and come in and out? And like, what can I do about it, really? And then the voice that came said, read Kant. So,
Sick. I mean, there's going to be good stuff about God. I don't know whether we'll get a proof for God.
no,
Uh,
no, not looking for that directly at all. It's more this sense, I think, in this line that I'm tracing more in like the whole scope of our series, the transcendentalization, like that something in that manner of movement. Um, so it's similar to like thinking space and time. Um, the
yeah,
you don't have to approach uh, God directly, or perhaps it's probably better not to. But thinking about something like space and time is probably going to be um,
yeah.
beneficial.
I mean, Kant has. We're getting slightly like off topic, but that's always fine. We'll get back on topic in a second because I think it is like I think it's relevant, and I'll say why in a second. But Kant has a lot to say about God, actually. Um, in the Critique of Pure Reason, even um, some stuff more bizarre than others. He will try to describe divine thought at some point, Um, there is something called intellectual intuition, is the word that he will use. And we don't have it, unfortunately. Um, it's, and it is kind of this in the beginning was the word, so to speak. Like, we'll come to learn what intuition is later, but intuition is like this individual object that is unique and particular. And we'll find out that concepts are going to be general and universal for at least finite mind thinkers. But for thinkers that have intellectual intuition, if there are any out there, then they just produce what they think. The thought is the same as the individual that it produces. There is no issue of correspondence between thought and things. There is no like mismatch between the idea and thing that is. It just breathes it into existence, so to speak. In maybe the old terms, its essence is existence or something like that. So there's a lot there's a lot worth thinking about, and from the literature I've read, which is not too much because it's mainly the transcendental argument literature, Kant's discussions of intellectual intuition generally don't get a lot of leeway in the literature. Like they're not talked about very seriously. But I think one of my main interests in Kant is about God and intellectual intuition and the sort of stuff that he has to say about God, especially in the transcendental dialectic, which we'll come across later, where he'll
Mm,
define God as something like the sum total of all possibilities. Uh,
yeah.
Fantastic stuff.
I'm I'm definitely tracking your use of the word there and in the beginning. And it's this the creative word, also like the living word, as in this place of the intellectual intuition, like this um I'm doing it quite a bit this session, but I'm feeling it helpful to just like kind of vibe with the thoughts. It's like, what did you just call God now? The
Sum total of all possibilities.
there's this sum total of all possibilities and this uh intuitive flow into creative product. And the word I think is very much like that between which I got in the position of the intellectual intuition that draws from that sum total and exercises that simultaneity of, I mean, also in John's gospel there, it's like all things were made through him, nothing that was made through him, something something of that kind, which is a uh, quite a radical quite a radical thing. And then the last thing, that when there's like a pocket of someone's thought that's ignored by scholarship, it's always it's always worth looking at what or maybe it's not. It's maybe not good for your career or like, but it's like it's interesting that that there are pockets of there are pockets of this thought. Uh,
Yeah, well, I mean, the thing is, I've looked mainly, largely, I think, at the analytic literature in the transcendental arguments tradition, which is particularly like based in the linguistic philosophy of people like Wittgenstein and stuff like that, later epistemologists. But like the German idealists, again, we'll get back on topic in a second. The German idealists are really interested in the concept of intellectual intuition, and part of like Schelling and Hegel that makes them so interesting is that like they're trying to work out how intellectual intuition is possible, if it is. And one might want to think about, we haven't gotten into it, but the nature of thought and whether thought is static, whether thought has a sort of productive kernel into it, where it sort of has this dynamic activity which brings to light different aspects of itself, whether thought can generate its own objects, whatever that might mean, um, or whether thought has to depend on something else for its objects. That's like that's an open question, I think, and it's one worth considering. Do we have intellectual intuition? Do we have like some sort of ability to do this? Um, Not the same as like God, who literally like can breathe things into existence if they exist, or are we fated to read off the character of things? is there any productive power to thinking, right? So again, I'm an armchair philosopher. I sit in my comfortable chair and I think I'm doing something for the most part. Uh, Many people think I'm not, I would imagine. And one would hope that I do get an account like that. Otherwise, I should be out there reading off the character of stuff because that's the way that thought gets its content. Otherwise, I'm just making stuff up in a non-contentful manner. So that's all worthwhile to think about. I think to bring it back to the topic of maths and physics, the two related things that I'm thinking about are the role of mathematics in like religious thinkers. So Spinoza's ethics, for example, and having his whole system be geometrically demonstrated. In the past, prior to the transcendental term, I would imagine that necessity and universality were not from a subject, but from something like a god or something like that, or from being, whatever you want to call it. Um, so that's one aspect of it. And then, like, I want to say, like, God's truths, like mathematical truths are true for God too, because they are always true, necessarily and universally. Um, that might not be the case with Kant. Uh, Something to consider. And then the other thing is like the other reason why I think it's really important to talk about God in this context is again because of the paradigm that we are in today for empirical sciences like physics and things like that, where at least on TV, a lot of the scientific rhetoric is anti-religious, or we've got an atheistic science, which is interesting, but again, possibly not always the way things have been and not always the way things have to be. Um, like there's this battle between religion and sciences where like the sciences are like, no, you guys believe in ridiculous things. Uh, and the religious people tell the school boards that they can't teach evolution in school anymore. I'm not sure if it's still happening, but it was happening when I was in school when I was younger. Um, they were like, you can't teach evolution in biology classes because it goes against certain like
Yeah.
fundamental beliefs.
It's 6,000 years old. Come
Yeah, but like, still, I mean, what, what, what are the dangers that we let into the world, and what are we supposed to be understanding when we think about science? Like, what is science, and where does the scientist find their laws from? Are they inquiring into the nature of God or the universe? What are they inquiring into? Like, what what is science about? And the issue is, I think I'm having like I've been reading some Simone Weil, the French mystic.
Yeah.
His brother was Andrew Weil, who was the French mathematician who was much more famous than him. I think he did Fermat's theorem, but I could be like incorrect about that.
Her brother.
Yeah,
Okay.
um, but I imagine that being a mathematician in a family of mystics would, like, I imagine that it would be strange because like the sciences are so opposed. But I imagine that for him, it was not because Simone Weil talks about like inspiration and like divine inspiration and the sort of ways in which like the attentiveness to the fullness of time brings us these scientific truths or something like that. Like what we're attending to when we attend to scientific truths and not scientific truths about the empirical observations that we're making. We're getting way more into the realm of I'm going to be slated for the sort of things that I have in mind. But it seems like there is this weird dimension behind science, like where how do we explain the way that we came up with the experiments or something like that? I mean, we could say like we were sitting there in the lab and talking about it and reading peer-reviewed papers, and there was this good experiment, so we thought we'd try something else. But oftentimes, at least in my experience with mathematics or science, it involves like an aha moment, like you do the thing and then it's like some point it like clicks. And you want to wonder what that clicking is. Like, is it the clicking of some imaginative laws? Is it some sort of divine understanding and being in sync with the divine understanding or something like that? Or is it just like, um, just getting it right, getting the facts right, right? Like, these are all explanatory accounts of what might be going on. Um, which one we decide to take up ought to be based on some sort of thinking about it.
Mm.
And just because one is more popular than the other at the moment doesn't mean that it will always be and has always been. Um, I don't know. It's interesting to think about. I think we should
Yeah.
move on to the physics stuff because I think like maybe another place where sometimes religion gets like I've been reading a lot of cog sci literature, so like sometimes you see these scientific papers use quick arguments to like completely bash like something, and
Yeah.
sometimes you'll see with the religious people too. But
Mm.
like one of the things is like the Copernican term and the
Mm.
Ptolemaic system and those sorts of beliefs, and they always just
Yeah.
like throw their left hand, but like it's unclear what's happening in the transition from the Copernican term or the from the Ptolemaic system to the Copernican system. Um, whether it's a working out of the Ptolemaic system, an inversion of that, whether it's like a Kuhnian revolution of the sciences where people just got like tired of that sort of scientific paradigm, or it's
Yeah.
there are different stories to tell, and some stories might be better than others. So to move along swiftly to physics from mathematics before we get too, of course. Uh, let's read the next paragraph. It took natural science much longer to find the highway of science, for it is only about 1.5 centuries since the suggestion of the ingenious Francis Bacon partly occasioned this discovery and partly further stimulated it, since one was already on its tracks, which discovery therefore can just as much be explained by a sudden revolution in the way of thinking. Here I will consider natural science only insofar as it is grounded on empirical principles. When Galileo rolled balls of weight chosen by himself down an inclined plane, or when Torricelli made the air bear a weight that he had previously thought to be equal to that of a known column of water, or when in a later time Stahl changed metals into calx and then changed the latter back into metal by first removing something and then putting it back again, a light dawned on all those who study nature. They comprehended that reason has insight only into what it itself produces, according to its own design, that it must take the lead with principles for its judgments according to constant laws, and compel nature to answer its questions, rather than letting nature guide its movements by keeping reason, as it were, in leading strings. For otherwise, accidental observations made according to no previously designed plan can never connect up into a necessary law, which is yet what reason seeks and requires. Reason, in order to be taught by nature, must approach nature with its principles in one hand, according to which alone the agreement amongst appearance can count as laws, and in the other the experiments thought out in accordance with these principles. Yet, in order to be instructed by nature not like a pupil who has recited to him whatever the teacher wants to say, but like an appointed judge who compels witnesses to answer the questions he puts to them. Thus, even physics owes the advantageous revolution its way of thinking to the inspiration that what reason would not be able to know of itself and has to learn from nature, it has to seek in the latter, though not merely ascribe it to it in accordance with what reason itself puts into nature. This is how natural science was first brought to the secure course of a science after groping about for so many centuries.
Sure. The so I'm gonna ask for help on that last bit in terms of how natural science is brought into a secure course of science after groping around. But this what really struck me, or the question, like they comprehended that reason has insight only into what it itself produces according to its own design. Um, and then I was thinking of this other framing that we kind of have in terms of the critique, limiting reason or giving reason to its proper place. So it seems like the natural scientists that are described here are kind of doing that because they're limiting reason to experience or observable phenomena in the world, or they're running experiments. But then Kant is saying that they realized whilst doing this that um, their reason only gets insight into what it has already designed as the space of possible insight, the space of the experiment. So I suppose that's the groping that he was talking about.
Well, the grouping is similar to the grouping in mathematics and also similar to the grouping in metaphysics. So like the grouping is like what I understand from the term is like you're just like reaching around. You don't like have anything solid to hold on to. You're not really sure what's going on yet. So there's no secure way to proceed in the science. So like people were doing experiments before that, and natural scientists existed before Francis Bacon and like the empirical sciences of their day, before Galileo, before Torricelli. There were people doing natural science. Like Aristotle has a book on biology and about physics. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
If Kant wanted to reference him, he would have. Um, it might be a worthwhile question to think about. Why doesn't Kant reference Aristotle's physics? It's a question. He could have. He says that Aristotle's logic, great, best invention ever. We haven't had to change a single bit of it. It's really, really good. Uh, the physics, metaphysics, yeah, I don't know,
Mm.
right? Like he says that metaphysics is confused, it doesn't know what it's doing. We need to find a new metaphysics. People were just doing Aristotelian science for like through the whole medieval period. They were like, yeah, this is it. This is cooking, right? Like
Yeah.
Descartes, like one of the things that Descartes is doing in the beginning of the Meditations is trying to challenge the Aristotelian account of like science. And so one might wonder, like, can you say that Aristotle's logic is so good, but metaphysics and physics we're just groping around? We just don't know what we're doing here, right?
Mm.
So the groping is like we're doing the experiments, we're producing them, but we don't really know what's going on. We're like we take note of accidents, like we start including things in our experiment that shouldn't be included. Um, and then the other thing is that like think about it in the mathematical sphere. He says that the Egyptians were groping around before it got to the Greeks, and that like Thales revolutionized the way that we do maths because we realized we don't have to think about the white triangle on this page being 2 centimeters long. We can just think about triangularity as such or something like that when we do the proof.
Mm.
Um, that's the revolution that happens in mathematics. So we can imagine that before that, people were drawing triangles in the sand or something like that with sticks, and then they were thinking about like the sand triangle number 23, if you want to be facetious about it. Um, like that's the sort of stuff that they were thinking about, and then they would experiment by like extending a line or something like that. Because I'd hate to say it, but you could probably do mathematical experiments too, right? Like you draw the triangle and then what you extend the line to see whether extending the line would add anything to it. And then you see that, oh, if I draw an arc here and an arc there, then the angle is the same. And you could do that as an experiment. Like you could test whether the interior angles of a triangle are equal to 180 degrees or something like that by like drawing a couple in the sand and taking the measurement. Maybe like going, yeah, 179 on this one, 181 on that one, 180 on that one, 182 on that one, right? And then like getting an average of the measurements and going, it's about 180. The average triangle has interior angles of 180 degrees, just like the average male weighs a certain amount or something like that. You could do a census. In fact, we should probably do one this year. Get a Google survey out, ask people about what they have recently witnessed, right? Like they could tell us. That's one way of getting knowledge. That's a sort of justification. Um, it has a sort of universality to it, right? Many people telling us one
Mm.
thing, so we can come to an average. Kierkegaard says everything is explained when you have an average. I don't know why I find that line so funny, but you get the idea, right? Like,
Yeah.
we could draw the triangles. We could do mathematical experiments, as Wittgenstein will later call them. Um, but that's not really what we're trying to do. We're trying to like produce these figures and their properties from our imagination and concepts or something like that.
Yeah.
And so too with physics, like we could run the test, right? We could get a few, I don't know, balls or something like that and drop them from the Tower of Pisa or something like that and see if they fell, or we could drop like a heavy ball and a feather and see if they fall at the same rate. But then, like, what happens when we throw the cat off the Pisa, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, like, or the bird, right? Like, I don't know. This is a Winfield example, and I think it's kind of useful because like all objects fall to the ground at 9.11 meters per second to the negative two. Some just don't like to, so they, I don't know, if you're a bird, fly away, or if you're a cat, struggle a bit in the air for a little bit, try to grab onto something, do your best to keep alive while falling off. If you're a person, maybe try to grab for a beam. I mean, it'd suck if scientists could experiment on these things. Like before ethics committees were in
Yeah,
place, we had to file for ethical clearance. So you can imagine Torricelli
yeah.
on top of the Leaning Tower of Pisa with a heavy ball and a feather and maybe a bird or something like that. But that's how you're trying to figure out whether things fall at the same rate. Things with different masses fall at the same rate. Well, good luck, because
Yeah.
different things, like maybe it's unclear at least what on earth life is and how it relates to physics. Because you drop a cat, boy, let me tell you, they're crafty. And if you drop a bird, it's unfortunate for you who wants to prove that everything falls at the same rate, but not for the bird because it can fly.
Sheesh.
Birds are wild, dude. What are they doing?
I think it's been far more sadistic when people have had the power to run these kinds of experiments.
Of course, but we don't need to physically run them to see the point here, which
Yeah.
is that all objects are supposed to fall at an equal rate, independent of their mass or something like that. And like the physicists are doing something, and maybe this is even a criticism of Kant, is that like the physicists are doing something and they're putting into nature their own like rules and laws, which things do seem to follow, right? Like things do follow the law of gravitation, and I'm aware that birds follow the law of gravitation too. I'm aware that they will fall. They do this really weird thing, which is flying, right? And like
Yeah.
flying is bizarre. What on earth is happening? They're using, I don't know, wind and force to keep themselves in the air against the constant falling. Even walking is kind of strange. Like I've been reading too much Kierkegaard and watching too much anime or something like that. But like running is
Walking's yeah. Yes.
running is like constant falling or something like that, or like walking is like constant falling. Um,
Yeah.
what on earth is going on there? Like living creatures are so weird.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's all these laws, and like we build planes to get around them. I don't know. Like humans can't fly, and then they go around just building things to fly. How bizarre. Anyways, the point is that when we do physics, these are the two proper sciences. Notice again that biology isn't a proper science for Kant either. So like study of life is not a proper science. Um,
Mm.
which again, we might wonder, is Kant right? Should biology be included in the proper sciences? Um,
Yeah.
one of the reasons why it might not be included in the proper sciences is that the universality and the necessity that it has might be different from physics and mathematics.
Mm.
If I'm trying to justify Kant's behavior at the moment. And you can think about it in terms of like convertibility. Not all living animals are convertible to general properties of things, but all things can be like tracked across to physical animals. So like animals are going to obey the laws of gravity and stuff like that. Um, but not everything that obeys the law of gravity is. There'll be some non-living things. that also obey this. So gravity has a wider scope than life or something like that.
Yeah.
So maybe it's about the universality. That might be one way of thinking about what Kant's doing here. But it's worth thinking about, and it's worth thinking about what physics is. So yeah, to answer your question about the groping, it's being confused, and now they found this sure path, which is to find out that reason has insight only to what it itself produces according to its own design. Um, we need to design experiments. There might be mathematical principles that we use to do that, or there might be like some sort of scientific principles that we use, and then we test them, right? Um, and the other line that I think is really interesting here is reason, in order to be taught by nature, must approach nature with its principles in one hand. Oh, that's not actually the line that I listened to. Where is this? I guess it's at the bottom of this. Yet, in order to be instructed by nature, not like a pupil who has recited to him whatever the teacher wants to say, but like an appointed judge who compels witnesses to answer the questions he puts to them. So reason, in order to be taught by nature, must approach nature with its principles in one hand, according to which alone the agreement amongst appearances can count as laws, and in the other hand, the experiments thought out in accordance with these principles. Yet, in order to be instructed by nature, not like a pupil who has recited to him whatever the teacher wants to say, but like an appointed judge who compels witnesses to answer the questions he puts to them. Um,
Mm.
I think that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Like are we just learning from nature? Do we just learn to recite the laws of nature? Do we just like learn from experience and go, well, every time I've seen this, this happens, and so this must be the case, right?
Yeah.
Or am I am I asking nature questions? Am I am I being like a judge who approaches nature with questions, I guess, and seeks an answer for them?
Yeah.
Notice also that like the judge is the standard in that case, right? So like in the pupil teacher case, I go to nature and nature teaches me something, and so the standard for the correctness of the thing comes from nature. But in the
Mm.
judging case, the judge is the judge in court and must judge what is correct according to the law. And so the judge has to figure out whether the defendant is correctly pleading their case or not. And so the standard of truth lies within the judge, not within the defendant. Uh,
Yeah.
And one might want to wonder what on earth is going on between the judge and the law and nature and the law.
Yeah.
What's the relation between natural law and conventional law, societal law, if there is any? Uh,
Yeah.
like we have different laws in different parts of the world, right? Like in America, right now, if I was to get another job, my visa would be in trouble and my citizenship wouldn't apply here. But in South Africa, if I was to get a job, I'd be seen as an upstanding citizen. And so there's two different laws in two different places. So the law that is culturally or conventionally asserted is not universal nor necessary. It seems to be particular and contingent. But natural laws are being compared here to non-natural laws, conventional laws. And we might want to wonder what on earth is going on there? Or are some laws contingent in particular while others are universal and necessary? They do say something like everybody is equal under the eye of the law,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
So these are questions. They're open for the time being. But
For the time being. Yeah. Because
yeah,
he's gonna answer everything.
of course, as we know, all philosophical thoughts say and set out and completely finish what they intend to do. That's why there's no literature written on them, and nobody's trying to figure out what on earth is going on after they've been written. I think we should just quickly press on to the last section.
Sweet.
Read that, quickly talk about that, and then end. But yeah, notice that there's a star at some point here. And in
Mm,
Kant's texts or in any German idealism, the footnotes are really important. This one's okay. Here I'm not following exactly the thread of the history of the experimental method, whose first beginnings are also not precisely known. So he's not giving us a historical account, which is interesting in and of itself. Like he's not tracing the history of the development of the sciences. He's
yeah.
interpreting in this way. Like who knows if that's what happened? But is this a
Yeah.
sick interpretation? Sure. Um, if someone could show that that's not what happens, maybe we'll have a worse case. I don't know. So the last passage reads Metaphysics, a wholly isolated speculative cognition of reason that elevates itself entirely above all instruction from experience, and that through mere concepts, not like mathematics, through the application of concepts to intuition, where reason thus is supposed to be its own pupil, has up to now not been so favored by fate as to have been able to enter upon the secure course of a science, even though it is older than all other sciences, and would remain even if all the others were swallowed up by an all consuming barbarism. For in it, reason continuously gets stuck, even when it claims a priori insight as it pretends into those laws confirmed by the commonest experience. In metaphysics, we have to retrace our path countless times because we find that it does not lead where we want to go. And it is so far from reaching unanimity in the assertions of its adherents that it is rather a battlefield, and indeed one that appears to be especially determined for testing one's power in mock combat. Mock combat. On this battlefield, no combatant has ever gained the least bit of ground, nor has any been able to base any lasting position on his victory. Hence, there is no doubt that up to now the procedure of metaphysics has been a mere groping, and what is the worst, a groping among mere concepts. I'm just going to keep reading.
Mm.
Now, why is it that here the secure path of a science still could not be found? Is it perhaps impossible? Why then has nature afflicted our reason with its restless striving for such a path, as if it were one of reason's most important occasions? Still more, how little cause have we to place trust in our reason, if in one of the most important parts of our desire for knowledge, it does not merely forsake us, but even entices us with delusions and in the end betrays us? Or if the path has merely eluded us for so far, what indications may we use that might lead us to hope that in renewed attempts we will be luckier than those who have gone before us? I should think that the examples of mathematics and natural science, which have become what they now are through a revolution brought about all at once, were remarkable enough that we might reflect on the essential element in the change in the ways of thinking that has been so advantageous to them, and at least as an experiment, imitate it insofar as their analogy with metaphysics as rational cognition might permit. I know this is a long reading, but this is the best part. Up to now, it has been assumed that all our cognition must conform to the objects. But all attempts to find out something about them a priori through concepts that would extend our cognition have on this presupposition come to nothing. Hence, let us once try whether we do not get farther with the problems of metaphysics by assuming that the objects must conform to our cognition, which would agree better with the requested possibility of an a priori cognition of them, which is to establish something about objects before they are given to us. This would be just like the first thoughts of Copernicus, who, when he did not make good progress in the explanation of celestial motions, if he assumed that the entire celestial host revolves around the observer, tried to see if he might not have greater success if he made the observer revolve and left the stars at rest. Now, in metaphysics, we can try in a similar way regarding the intuition of objects. Yeah, I think that's more than enough.
Yeah. It's we are strange creatures.
Why do you
This
say that?
just the well, I guess it's in part it's the gift of having it has momentum, intellectual momentum, significantly so. Um, but it's often like just a certain image that is taken up of a thinker and of his thought. There's always a different experience engaging the text itself. Um, but also just like um, it was something. I guess just one of those moments of like a kind of wonder that I should try and uh, articulate more, but like wondering at what we are doing in uh, philosophy and thinking about stuff in science in trying to know. Um, I know that nothing that I'm saying right now is that it's more like a fumbling around a glimpse, um, and like a contentless glimpse. Um, there was something that he expressed about i- the nature endowing reason with this peculiarity that then also ends up meaning that it deceives itself. So like really relating to this sense of like I think how I presenced it in a personal sense for myself was this like introspective uh sense of anatomical uh maybe use a word like fidelity, but that's not quite right. Like anatomical perfection, maybe. And then your sense of like never having found a triangle, and like why? What is it that's looking for the perfect triangle, or looking for a triangle, or like what what is bending reason way, or what is like what is feeding what what is that like um that drive, that consistence, because some people don't seem as bothered with that sense of imperfection or um yeah, I would have to use words like incompleteness, or but I might be straying a bit from what was there. And then I guess like again for me the this reiterated image of Kant is very much expressed in what came out at the end, in terms of, for once let us try from the other direction. Let's not assume that our cognition must conform to the objects, but that the objects must conform to our to our cognition. Um, and then I'm still just very much wondering like what he I mean, I have like the sense of what is a priori, but I'm definitely developing like a hunger.
Well, two things, I think. One thing that would be worth drawing attention to is like that stumbling was really beautiful because like it looked like you got knocked off your intellectual feet. And those are oftentimes the best moment in philosophy. Like when you hear something, it's just like, what? And like you don't have the words to express it yet. Like thought is still finding its feet. It doesn't have like it doesn't have the power of like the gesture to stand on, or like it doesn't have context to like hold itself firm anymore. It's like something has been knocked loose. And
Yeah.
good luck, Godspeed. We wish you well. Um, but then those moments are always the most valuable in philosophy because like those are like moments where it really impacts you and makes you understand the text and relate to the text for yourself, which I think is super important. And yeah, metaphysics is bizarre, but thinking is bizarre, right? Like, first of all, not all creatures do it. Like, sorry, that might be offensive to some people, but I mean it in the sense that like we don't see dogs with careers as lecturers sitting at their desk with stories. That's all I mean. I don't mean that they're not intelligent animals. I just mean that it's not their day job. Uh, Whereas, like us, there's a long history of thinking, even in terms of like societies and stuff like that. Thinking doesn't seem to be like, it doesn't seem to be like those cotton jerseys for the winter that people make for their dogs, um, that are a product of the times, I think, that might fade. Like a dog in armor would be cool to see. I would love to see a knightly dog. Um, but you know, the times and the fashions change. But thinking it's been around for a long time. We've been doing it for a while now. Plato is pretty old, and I'm sure we've been doing it before Plato. Um, So it seems kind of like a thing that we do, like one of the activities. That and art making, like drawing, has also been around forever. Um, Both of those are very. One might wonder whether there's a relationship between that. I think Hans Jonas talks about the ability to draw and create symbols and the ability to think, and the relatedness between those two. Um, but it is bizarre that we do it. And it is bizarre that there's this sort of not quite perfectness about it.
Mm.
That like the ball isn't really quite circular. And I mean, one of the things that was annoying about that mathematics situation that I spelled out earlier was that I guess maybe it's because of the education system and because like sometimes in education you have to just prioritize getting the entire class to understand something rather than focusing on the individual student, which is a terrible thing, but it is life.
Yeah.
Uh, People pay school fees for a reason. Um, is I was really frustrated in that, like, what I was basically told was to just ignore it. Um, like, of course, it's
Yeah.
slightly imperfect to the circle, but if we just ignore it, then it's like a perfect circle, right? Like, if we just
Yeah.
ignore the
Yeah. Yeah.
perfect, and it's like, yeah, but then it's not right, right? Like, surely we want to be accurate, and then the question becomes like, how accurate do we want to be? Like,
Yeah.
what
I
are we doing when we do science or maths or something like that? Like, are we just
yeah.
making stuff up? Because like if we can just ignore the imperfection, are we are we making stuff up or are we abstracting away? And does abstracting away mean eliminating the content from the thing and getting to another kind of entity that is like a property of an entity or something like that? Like what on earth are we doing when we just get told to like, don't sweat the big stuff. Just focus.
Yeah, I have to jump in, yeah, because the like that relatedness to that moment, it's like it's in the name of the channel, like the holy, like
Yeah,
the holes,
yeah,
and this disposition that like it's like because as you're speaking now, the way that I'm kind of mapping it, it's like it's in learning is attending to those holes in the sense of developing understanding, like. But then there's this disposition that wants you to just kind of ignore, smooth over so that you can function. And function means serving the end of whatever context it is, like getting you through the maths year or, just
mhm,
like do the repetition or the memory.
mhm,
Um, so there's this ignoring of the gap, but then you can also engage the gap, or what engaging the gap as you're expressing begins to reveal the sense of like some prior notion you have of that it shouldn't be a gap,
mhm.
that there shouldn't be a hole, and that idea that there shouldn't be a hole is operative for you, and
Yeah,
that idea itself can be destructive. I guess the most destructive part of it is the one that makes you ignore the whole, because then you ignoring the whole for now a sense of wholeness that you have to dupe yourself for. But if
yeah.
you like attending to the whole or the gap, then um you can also, I think, give up the sense for a whole or disavow your desire for a completion, um, because of the insistence of a whole. And then you can just say, okay, well, it's all holy and it's all like incomplete. And that means I don't have to think it, or I don't have to. But that's slipping again into the other. So it's like, how do you keep attending to that negative, to the,
I mean, I think it's really difficult. Like, I think it's like a hard space to navigate because, like, I'm not really sure that there's like a perfect answer to it. Like, I think there's like maybe general guidelines because, like, the way that you're describing it, it sounds like this like fabric, and like there's like
mm,
this fabric has many holes, and the fabric is knowledge, or something like that. And we could like smooth over or like patch up or like fit in. Um, and occasionally we get the right stuff to fix the holes, but sometimes we don't. And this has always been like another worry for me. Is like I think the holes are important, right? Like we
mm,
have to attend to them, especially when they come up. And we have to figure out what's going on there. Because otherwise we're just like proceeding in ignorance, we're just smoothing over, we just don't know what's going on. But then the other thing is like too many holes and we don't have like the fabric anymore. Like if it's just
Yeah.
all holes, boy, not only is that just like terrifying, but if it's holes all the way
Yeah.
down, it's just it's just not the vibe, dude. Like unfortunately, like we have to function, like we have to like eat and like continue to live for the most part, I would imagine. I mean, we don't have to, we can do whatever we want. But
Yeah.
you get the gist of what
You,
I'm saying. Like
you you
in
have
order
to,
not
and
to
you
like
must enjoy it.
yeah, it's life is good. Like you just gotta do it. You gotta live long and prosper. That's the vibes. But I mean, like you could choose not to do that. Like it is a choice, and I mean, I don't. This is not an encouragement to anybody. Do not sue me. Please do not be involved in any irresponsible actions because of this. But there are people that have made the choice not to do that, or there are people that have booked out of like society or like the intellectual like arenas, so to speak, even because like too many holes. Like it seems like you've gotta have some fabric, like
Yes.
some stuff.
Yeah.
Like it might be the case that like a slightly patched up fabric is more conducive to whatever it is. I guess it depends on you. This is we're getting way off track here, but like I think
Sucked
that's
into a
fine.
hole. Yeah.
Yeah, the hole at the end has been deep, so to speak. But the issue is like even if you're like full of holes, like yeah, you are. Uh, this would be an appropriate place for Allen Ginsberg's Howl, which I reread last night for the first time.
Nice.
In like 7 years. The
Wow.
beginning, I think, of Howl is just holy, 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 holy. Um, and then it's a series of like holy chants for like Holy Ginsberg, Holy Kerouac, holy writers, all of these people.
Ah, damn.
Then it details the holes on our bodies as it does, and continues to talk about holes. It's very good, but there's a level of holiness that I think is unconducive to operating, um, and like you need resistance to find holes. Almost, it's like the holes
Mm,
that are there. If you just like let the seams rip, they're not going to be productive holes, so to speak. Like the fabric is just going to tear apart. But if like
yeah.
you have the fabric to like create some friction against another piece of fabric, then perhaps the hole that you create would be a productive hole that like is a weak spot in the original fabric rather than a void into nothingness. Because as much as I love the void, sheesh, is it scary? Like the nothing. I've been reading too much Kierkegaard. Again, I will say it. And like I've been reading Philosophical Crumbs, and there's a section on the absolute paradox, and I guess God. Um, but Kierkegaard has some stuff to say about the nothing that is frightening, to say the least. Yeah, I was going to talk about setting the stars in motion, um, but I guess we've been left in the void.
Oh, was setting the stars in motion in this?
Yeah, this would be just like the first thoughts of Copernicus, who, when he
Oh,
did not
yes.
progress in the explanation of the celestial motions, if he assumed that the entire celestial host revolves around the observer, tried to see if he might not have greater success if he made the observer revolve and left the stars at rest. Um, so I guess taking the stars out of motion, setting the subject
Yeah.
into motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, um, literally like changing the universe. Um, And so one might think about what that means for metaphysics. But I'm pretty happy to end in the void. I think like
Yeah,
ending in the void
yeah.
is good. We can try and fill up the space next week again.
I'm gonna read the Howl. I'm gonna read Howl now. For sure.
I feel like you'll get demonetized.
These are not my concerns. I don't know if you check the stats on this channel.
But I in no means affiliate myself with Allen Ginsberg. If any future employers are watching,
No, you just confess. Don't avoid it. Yeah, no, we'll jump back. We'll jump back in the void. This this no, I'll read it in private. I was reading Auguries of Innocence by Blake with my cousin yesterday.
yeah,
It was rad.
sick, cool.
Poetry.
Well, we'll end in the void, and we'll have hinted towards another set of voids that the listener can check out for themselves.
The I'm just gonna reclaim hosts. There we
Cool.
go. Rad. Thank you, Hadley.
Of course.
Um, I'm gonna ping Sipo and Thomas, and they must definitely watch this and keep up with us.
Mhm.
Um, we're gonna have
Yeah,
to
and
try and be rhetorical with them, I think.
sure.
Sophistic.
And I'll keep you up to date about whether the times and stuff have to change. And
Yeah.
enjoy how
Yes.
it is one of my favorite poems of like all time. Um,
Yeah. What's this? James Franco. Uh, I've listened to it a few times. Uh, to his voice reading it. But also,
cool.
I think probably around the same time, like 2015. My roommate
Yeah,
was going nuts for it. Yeah.
it was good when I was like 19 or 20. It's less good now, but there's a part of me that still loves it.
Moloch, cock and balls.
Exactly.
uh,
All right.
ish. Okay.
Okay.
Ciao, Hadley.
Have a good one.